which is not true, because again, the data shows that migrants go very seldom to use the services, the universal services that we have. They use it, but they don't use it so much as the nationals. Why? Because again, the migrants, and a vast majority of them, are very busy going about their lives, trying to make a living, and in many times they have a higher resistance, and until they are like very, very, very sick, they don't go to the doctor.
Hello, today we are with Roxana Nicula. Thank you for joining us. Roxana Nicula is the president of the Foundation for the Advancement of Liberty, Fundalib. And this is a Spanish think tank which furthers the cause of free markets and individual liberty. Roxana is also a lawyer and a TTMBA graduate of the Atlas Leadership Academy. And you've worked a lot on, competitiveness within the EU and economic freedom, and more recently on immigration and especially, the economic integration of immigrants. And we're going to start with this this issue of immigration because we have recently Freedom of Movement magazine. Make sure to read it. But many times when we think of immigration, or one of the major debates is that, immigrants are coming here, they're either taking our jobs, or they're taking up all of the welfare, or they're not contributing well enough to society. And I personally know someone that has been waiting for a work authorization for about 2 or 3 months now. So this person has a job in a sector that we know it's difficult to find people. They're always looking for people to be employed in this sector, but they've been waiting months for the government to say, yes, you have the right to get this job, even though there's no one else to do this job. And we see this over and over again. And so what did you think? How do you see the what I like to call the economic exclusion of immigrants, generally in Europe, but in other parts of the world? And why is this a problem?
First of all, thank you very much for giving me this space, and I look forward to enjoy SpeakFreely. At the foundation, we also have a magazine, which is Avance, which means advancement of the liberty. So I know the hard work, but then it pays off because this is one of the channels that we have to express ourselves and to share our views with the rest of the community. Going back to your question, first of all, as a liberal, I'm always very interested in not only in the utilitarian part of a policy or of a reality that we are facing, and the reality that we are going to discuss today, it's the immigration and their economic integration, but also from the human being value point of view. We have to remember, and if there are people, and unfortunately there are many people who still forget, that all human beings, all throughout our entire history, at some point, someone in our family has migrated from one place to another. So that's a start. Why? Because human needs, human curiosity pushes us to kind of amplify our boundaries and to look for new things that can improve our lives. So we must not forget that all those people who are deciding to, in many cases, even risk their lives, and then they have to invest whatever they have, much or less, to improve their lives and their families' lives, are human beings. And from that dignity point of view, I do believe that the liberals have the moral ground, let's say, but also the economic ground to offer the best solutions to integrate the migrants in our societies. After what we thought that the European Union was going to be a sort of like US 2.0, when they were founded, the land of the free, where everyone would kind of be able to come and fulfill their dreams, then we got stuck in our faces with the harsh reality. It's not so free because we have a lot of regulation that's been in place now for many years in terms of, for instance, access to banking services and to finances which even for nationals now, it's becoming more and more of a problem, with the excuse always of like protecting someone or like against money laundering, but that's not the reality actually. The reality is that with this new current legislation that we have in place in the European Union, for instance, the migrants, millions of migrants, are excluded from the conventional banking system. And it's in opposition actually with the directive that the Commission approved several years ago, through which they were saying no one in the European Union can be excluded from having a bank account. And that is happening to the immigrants in high numbers. I can give you, for instance, examples of, I've been talking to many communities here in Spain, and one of the communities, the Venezuelan communities, were like even devising new system to get the information among each other and to learn that there is, in some obscure province in the other part of the country, a small bank office where the manager is like more prone into be less bureaucratic and make easier things for them to open the account. So instead of protecting consumers and protecting our rights as consumers, what the current administration, both in Europe and in our country, has managed to do is the opposite. They managed to create big bureaucracy, a lot of regulation, higher costs, because that regulation and that bureaucracy always increases costs for the common citizen that has to comply with all that. But they managed to create actually a lot of uncertainty and legal instability with this. So I think that the work at the Foundation for the Advancement of Liberty was like to analyze what is happening right now, what are the current regulations that we have in place, both in the European Union, from the Commission and also from the European Parliament, but also in our own country, because sometimes there are like fairly interesting regulations that come from Brussels, but they are not translated to the national reality. And they take times, 8 years, to be translated. Governments, national governments sometimes even get fined for not transposing that regulation, which, for instance, I remember the Bolkestein directive on like opening the skies and opening the economy and so on. Spain, for instance, it took more than 10 years to start applying some of what that directive was saying. So this is a little bit of a short story about what is happening with migrants and their access to financial services, which is a part that from Fundalib standpoint, it's essential for them. One, whichever sum of money they can bring from their own home country to the new country to stay safe, to not be subject to all kinds of mob organizations that will charge you high percentages of commission to hold your money when you arrive and you maybe don't have like a sure and safe place to stay at the beginning, in the first weeks and so on. But also the problem is that you arrive here, you have a job, even in many cases, and this is have to be like repeated over and over again for the entire civil society. Normally, migrants are people who are very courageous. They know what they sign up for when they come into a country, and they know they will have to start probably from a very low position and walk their way up. And they are willing to do all those jobs that you are now in the welfare state of mind not willing to do. So that it's debunked. We have the data to support this, both in Spain and in any other European country, that they bring much more and they contribute much more to the system than they take. And this is a reality. Second, migrants are much more compliable. You can check it in our reports, but we've found out, I mean, I was sure, my intuition was that they were more compliant to the regulations, to the norms of that society than the nationals. Yes, the data also showed us that it's indeed like this. And third, they are more prone to start businesses, to take risks, which our people, which Spaniards in general, are very risk averse individuals, especially in the past 20 years in the welfare state has kind of taken over of big portions of the society. But migrants, no, they want to be useful. They want to take control of their world and their lives. And that's why it's easier for them to start thinking, okay, until I know the culture here, until maybe in many cases, until I dominate the language, because of course we have a lot of migrants coming from Latin America, but then we also have mentality and cultural issues, because languages can be tricky. You think, no, they speak our own language. Yeah, but the Mexican mentality and culture is completely different than a Spanish mentality. We have more in common with Polish people than we have with Mexicans or Hondurans, but the language makes us think, okay, since we speak more or less the same language, then we understand better. So there are many challenges, even for Latin Americans coming in Spain or in the European Union to adapt. That's why they are more prone into thinking, okay, I'm going to try start a business first, and then see whatever other opportunities I can create for myself or there are in the market. But of course, we have the data to support that. For instance, in Spain, migrants are much more successful. It's 4-1 in comparison to the nationals in terms of thriving of and making their business go past the first initial phase and consolidate the business. And that's a data that anyone can look upon from the National Bank. We have it also in our reports, because we did several reports on migrant entrepreneurship. One at first to offer also the current government some ideas of policy, specific policy, when they were discussing reforming the new Ley de Extranjería, it's called, the migration law that we have here. And we are happy to say that at least some of the considerations that we were pushing forward in that report, in the end, entered the new law. There are many other flaws that are there, but at least to walk through a unification and then making easier for migrants to present their papers, not in many offices, but in just one-stop window, and move forward from that. Also, another proposal that now the reality, it's kind of giving us the truth about this, was with the digitalization of the administration and with the fact that there are a lot of corruption involved because there is very few manpower to deal with all the cases and all the permits. And then because of COVID, they moved everything online, but they moved everything online in a very poor way, very centralized mentality way, which created this free market. I don't call it black market. It's free market of individuals and organizations that are giving options to migrants to kind of achieve those numbers to be able to go and present their papers. What I'm trying to make the administration understand that the less bureaucracy we have involved, the better will be not only for the migrants, but also for our economy. Because the sooner they become productive members of the society, the sooner they don't need so much assistance as some parties are saying, that they live off all kinds of subsidies and all kinds of support from the state based on the taxpayers' money, which is not true, because again, the data shows that migrants go very seldom to use the services, the universal services that we have. They use it, but they don't use it so much as the nationals. Why? Because again, the migrants, and a vast majority of them, are very busy going about their lives, trying to make a living. And in many times, they have a higher resistance, and until they are very, very, very sick, they don't go to the doctor, in opposition to other segments of the population. So, and what we did with that project, it was very cool because we said, okay, everyone does policy papers and does policy recommendations, but, and we are kind of fed up of seeing that narrative that you were mentioning, Ogi, earlier, that everything from a negative point of view. You watch the news, you watch talk shows that talk about migrants, everything is black in terms of negativity. And we said, no, let's flip the issue and start showing the positive things that migration has for our society. And how do we do that? We do it through the policy recommendation, and we show the data, but we also do it through a documentary. And that was the cool part, because we got to know wonderful people from like 10 different communities. We interviewed a lot of profiles of small, medium entrepreneurs from different types of sectors. And we ended up with a very cool documentary, which is in our channel on YouTube, in Fundalib. And it's called Immigrant Entrepreneurs Value Without Border. And that documentary tells the story of 8 entrepreneurs that come from different regions, from China, from Honduras, from Venezuela, from Morocco, from Senegal. And it tells the story in a very cool way. I mean, it talks about bureaucracy, but like in a more light way, you know, and how they speak about, so I have to do this, and I have to do this other compliance. And you can see, you know, the absurdity of things, that I cannot dedicate the entire attention to growing my business because I have to do this kind of things, and then the costs. And they explained that there's one lady that has a cool coffee shop, Venezuelan coffee shop. She was one of a big top lawyer in the administration in Venezuela, and she ended up being an entrepreneur and selling coffees and very good pastries here in Madrid. And she's like she's very funny actually, and talking about, you know, how she has to handle all the bureaucracy. But that tells the story behind it, you know, that even people that are very well trained, even she was like a lawyer, she was like very much accustomed to deal with administration, with public administration, yet she had to hire a specific consultant here to try and understand how to deal with all the bureaucracy and all the fiscal burdens that she has to comply with in order to keep her business surviving and, fortunately, thriving. And that documentary, actually, it won the Worldwide International Film Festival on Migration Issues in New York a couple of years ago. Was finalist in Seoul in the short documentary category a year before. So we are very happy that we managed to kind of balance and put those stories out there so that people can even relate to some extent with the stories of those immigrants. And actually, now we are still like very much involved with all the migration policies, both in the European Union and also in Spain. And probably now it's also the time to kind of make that claim for the open borders that you guys, freedom of movement, that you are like very, very accurately decided to include in the magazine.
Thank you very much. And just to wrap up, what would you say is one policy issue, or let's say one regulation in particular in the EU that you would love to see change in the coming years? And what direction do you think we should be going in?
So both at the EU level and here in Spain, and probably this is something that we can do in many other countries in the European Union, I would love to have that 24-hour, since the migrant arrives to the country, option to go on a portal, online portal, register him herself with their ID, whichever, if it's expired, because in many cases there are people who actually flee to save their lives and maybe they don't have the right documentation, and get at least a temporary permit and start functioning as a full individual in the society. So they can contract their housing lease, their transportation card, their access to open a bank account, access to open a saving bank account, because this is another problem that they have. So they can save, and when they become owners of houses, of flats, of businesses, and so on. That's, I think, if we manage to actually resolve that, then of course we will go about solving the issue with the banking and finance regulations, which is like this absurd obsession of the commission and all of the politicians of absolute zero risks, because they feel that that's the way to actually fight corruption and fight money laundering and so on, which is not true. And we've been seeing this failed policy for years. It's going to drive us in the ground, everyone. So we need to change that. But first, let's get them like 24 hours. They arrive, they have the right to take a break. And if they want to start working, to be allowed to work from day one.